Hey everyone, Rho here. You know, I think it's about time on the channel we got back around to talking some Constantin Valdor. And well, of course, there's some pretty big talking points regarding old Constantin right now. But today I really want to focus on the character of Valdor, the essence of his being, and how I still believe that this is integral to his disappearance. General spoiler warning to begin, the events we are discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay, Constantin Valdor, legendary Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. Alongside Malcador and the Emperor himself, he made up the triumvirate of burgeoning imperial rule, successfully leading the Custodes throughout the Unification Wars, Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. After this, as we know, Valdor would ultimately disappear at some point during the days after these events, within the time period known as the Scouring. And of course his actions since then have become a hotly debated topic, especially with the release of the novel Penitent. So if you haven't read that one, you may definitely want to go and give that a read. However, in the absolute wildfire of speculation and theories on just what Valdor may or may not be up to since his disappearance, the one thing I really think is integral to keep in mind is the essence of his character. The Emperor of Mankind went to a lot of effort in order to recruit, or perhaps acquire would be a better term, the young Valdor from his parents. I mean, we're talking moving entire armies to make it happen. So whatever it was the Emperor foresaw or sensed within him, it was clearly something extremely important, and something worth expending great effort to achieve. We know the Captain General went on to become something a level above even his fellow Custodes, achieving legendary status amongst his kin. And so great was his martial skill, he was even rumoured to perhaps be some form of Primarch himself. And whether you believe that or not is up to you. Regardless of all Valdor's promise and abilities, there remains one undeniable fact about him, one shared by every single one of his custodian brethren. And that is his complete and absolute genetically engineered loyalty to the Emperor of Mankind. The Custodians, unlike other beings in the galaxy, are completely and utterly designed and bred to serve and follow the Emperor's every word. They are quite literally the embodiment of his will. Their one goal is his survival. And thus, truly, the Custodes do not serve the Imperium, they serve only the Emperor. Now, how is this any different to the Primarchs, you might say? Well, if we cast aside the illuminating aura of the Emperor, the sheer power that compels you to kneel before him, in essence the Primarchs are his sons. Their ties are the bonds of blood, from father to son. But like all sons, they retain their free will. When you boil it all down, they choose to follow the Emperor, highlighted by Angron perfectly, who actually refuses. So as such, they had their free will to turn against him, which ultimately we see fully half of them do. But this is something a Custodes can simply never do. It's an interesting topic to consider. and something we've actually seen discussed by Valdor himself in the short story Magisterium. As the Emperor remains silent upon the Golden Throne, holding the portal closed against the demon hordes, Rogal Dorn and Valdor have a rather tense discussion. Rogal rebuking Valdor for never being able to question the Emperor, to not be able to think for himself in regards to the Emperor's orders, to sometimes push back against his wishes. And he asks Valdor quite simply, can you now think for yourself? Because now you will have to. And here Valdor for his part replies that if ever there was a time to question the Emperor, it was with the forging of the Primarchs. Everything that had transpired had always fallen inside the Emperor's plans or patterns, even the defeats. But the only element that could never be accounted for was them. And I've said it many times before, but if you've never dived into any of the Black Library short stories, then man, you really should give them a look, because they are an absolute treasure trove of awesome lore moments, and in particular the Horus Heresy series ones. There's some amazing Primarch, Malcador, or Emperor of Mankind moments you would otherwise miss out on, such as this one. And once you've read it, you can make up your own mind on whose side of the argument you fall on. And both characters are right in their viewpoints to some degree. But for me, I have to say, the more I read of Rogal Dorn, the more I absolutely just fall in love with him. His character has truly shined more and more as we've approached and entered the grand final of the Siege of Terror. And he's not wrong in asking this question of Valdor, because it is a legitimate one, and one I think that can still be hotly debated. Can Valdor and the Custodes truly think for themselves? For me, their decisions from this point on are completely and utterly made in trying to interpret the Emperor's wishes. They do what they believe the Emperor would want. But can that really be called a choice? Can you really call that freedom of thought? It's an interesting debate to have, and one I think is integral to our conversation today of Valdor's character. While there is still the most important moment still to play out in the ultimate end of the Siege of Terror, we have actually glimpsed already some of its aftermath, which, again importantly for Valdor, shows us the continued nature of his character. In the short story Two Metaphysical Blades, which again is another absolute must-read story, we get to glimpse Valdor and Leman Russ in the aftermath of the Siege of Terror, with the Emperor having assumed the Golden Throne and the Wolf King arriving back to the throne world too late. And here Russ is consumed by his grief, the character and bluster completely gone from his spirit. He is consumed with the loss of his father. But Valdor, ever the Custodes, still remains locked on how this must be a part of the Emperor's grand plan, because he simply can't comprehend a universe of anything else. And despite their differences and surface dislike for one another, Valdor has actually come to think of Russ as a friend. And here, with Russ wallowing amid his grief, Valdor tries to tell him that nothing the Emperor did was without its reason, and that essentially it may take many years or centuries, but whatever the Emperor's plan was, it will come to fruition. Now Russ, of course, as any human in this situation would, simply doesn't want to hear it, However, it's again another great highlight of the character and motivations of Valdor. He just can't think outside the Emperor's design. Russ, for all his Primarch might, is human, and as any man is grieving the loss of his father, the loss of his Jarl or King. But Valdor simply can't, because his nature remains locked to the Emperor of mankind. He cannot conceive that this isn't all part of the Emperor's plan. Even here, in his own custodian version of attempting to console his friend, he can only relay it in terms of the Emperor must have planned it all. And hey, I'm not saying he's right or wrong, I'm just saying how importantly this reflects the character of Valdor. Even in the absence of the Emperor, he remains as tied to him as he was in life. The Emperor having a voice and issuing his orders is really immaterial, because Valdor remains as bound to him as he did before. It's not a matter of wanting to change. For Valdor and the Custodes, it's a matter of not being able to change. They cannot even envisage or comprehend a life not dedicated to him. Anything and everything they do always has and always will revolve directly around him. So for all the possibilities of just what Valdor may be doing since leaving Terra, which we'll discuss some more next week, for me the one thing you absolutely have to keep in mind, no matter what evidence has arisen or theories thereafter, is that the character of Valdor, the essence of who he is, remains bound just as much now as it always has to the wishes and life of the Emperor of mankind. Because only in death does duty end. But as always guys, what do you think? How much freedom of choice do you feel Valdor truly retains? How much room for scope does he have to act within his perceived notions of the Emperor's grand plan? And how much do you feel that would affect his actions since disappearing? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. But as always guys, with that said, I am off and I'll see you all again real soon.